Hey everybody, today I want to talk about how polarized politics are nowadays. Now I'm going to speak more specifically for America because that's where I reside, but you can see this globally for sure. I attended a seminar today that was about depolarizing ourselves, specifically with politics. So I'll mention one or two ideas from the seminar, but then mostly I'll go off on my own ideas of how you can think better and in the end depolarize yourself politically. First thing the seminar talked about was starting with yourself, depolarizing yourself. And that's absolutely correct. We all are a product of where we came from, our culture, our families, all of our individual experiences, and that leads us to our worldview. You're going to have biases or preferences just based on the specific life that you lived. Many know this, but many don't. You can see where that is going to affect your political ideas or affiliations. But in reality, that is kind of surface level. If you want to look down at the roots of everything, it's important to know the cognitive biases that we all have. I invite you to look up cognitive biases, learn more about them. There are dozens, maybe hundreds at this point, and we all fall victim to some of them. And this affects every way we think, not just political polarization. But it's a great place to start to actually look into this, be aware, and really investigate some of the cognitive biases that you fall in daily. So, what other things can you control within yourself? If you belong to or identify with one political party, can you examine and see, are you critical on people on your own side of the aisle? Or do you tend to give them passes? Whereas on the other side of the aisle, you tend to focus on what they have wrong and you don't give folks on that side of the aisle a pass. So in the end, it's worth being more critical of your side. Another thing to do to be less polarized from other political parties is to try to identify what the other side has right. Remember, on my channel, I talk a lot about everything you believe in, you have part of it wrong and part of it right. Even your deepest, most sacred held belief or your sacred cows, you have something flawed in that idea. Life is too complicated. There's too many variables for you to be 100% right. So starting from a place of being humble is a great place to start. But to identify what folks on the other side of the aisle have right, I recommend a tactic called steel manning. And what that is essentially, if you disagree with somebody's point of view, you want to be well read and understand why someone feels that way, that you can explain to them their idea as good or better that they can. So, if you're talking from somebody from the other side of the political aisle, and let's say we're talking about immigration, you want to be well read and understand that side's argument, explain every bullet point, and when you finish, they have nothing to add. They go, wow, yes, that is how I feel. That doesn't mean you have to completely agree, but at least if you can present their idea in a way that shows that you understand their point of view, you're going to get less resistance in the conversation. And I know this is going to be tough, but you might actually agree with some of it. Another way to help with depolarizing the extreme political climate that we see today is using effective communication techniques. Now, what I find very important when you're talking to somebody else is it is the messenger, not the message. We are emotional creatures. And I found that over a decade being a manager in my career, I could deliver bad news to somebody. And if I was empathetic and did it in a kind way, they received it surprisingly well. And I also noticed the opposite. It may sound funny. I sometimes delivered good news, and I delivered it so poorly that people actually got annoyed or upset with it. So, the content of the message, of course, matters, but the delivery is much more impactful, especially because we are emotional creatures. So, always remember it's the messenger, not the message. And I know that sounds black and white, and we don't believe in black and white thinking here, but it's just a shortcut to remember that concept. Another way to depolarize is to stay out of echo chambers. So I talked about the cognitive biases earlier. One of them is confirmation bias. It feels good to hear what we already believe in, to have somebody confirm what we already feel is true. It emotionally is disturbing. Instead of harmony, there's discordance when somebody says something that we don't agree with. It doesn't feel good, so we tend to avoid it. The internet, and specifically social media, has made the ability for this to happen way worse. There's so many different channels and talking heads, it's very easy to find a group of very narrow, like-minded people and just sit in an echo chamber and agree with each other all day long. Remember, that's a very incomplete perspective. You definitely have something wrong in your argument and you need to widen it up and take in more information. If I had a magic wand, I would probably get rid of social media. Research shows from 2013 to 2023, in just 10 years, our perception of how bad things are in this country, including racism, sexism, many other topics, skyrocketed within that 10 years. And before that, it was slowly going down, judged by every demographic. So social media, unfortunately, gave a megaphone and a magnifying glass to the worst things that were in society and blow them up to make them seem like that's most of what's going on. Perception is reality, and unfortunately, social media has super duper warped most people's perception. But in reality, if you're going to stay on social media, I recommend you make a second account or a burner account and really curate who you have on the second account. Pick the top most popular people on each side of the aisle, pick the top politicians from each side of the aisle, pick the top folks that are considered thought leaders, and add in as many independent and middle ground people as you do on the polar extremes. Again, you don't have to agree with everything you're seeing, but at least widening the information you're taking in will have you in less of an echo chamber and have some idea what other people are thinking. That way, when you do talk to them in the future, maybe you can try that steel manning technique and see if you can show some understanding and compassion for how they view the world. So as it feels that our world gets even more polarized, I thought it was important to make just a quick video to give a couple of tips on how to police yourself and maybe interact with people from the other side. As I mentioned, you have to start with yourself, check your biases, do some soul searching, ask, what do I have wrong in my ideas? Ask, what did they have right in their ideas? Because both are true. Remember how to effectively communicate. It's the messenger, not the message. If you want to have a difficult political conversation with somebody, try to steel man their argument. Make it better than them, whether you agree with it or not. And people will be way more open to actually having a conversation with you because they feel like they're heard and understood. Stay away from echo chambers. Social media is the biggest one, and data shows that it has been the biggest factor in tearing people apart. The fringe that has always existed gets amplified, it has more energy, and it tends to take over the narrative. And lastly, I'll never tell you what to think. I like to challenge you on how to think. So always be challenging your own mind. Open-mindedness, challenging your own beliefs constantly, knowing you have a lot wrong and that that person has a lot right. I like to say I like to challenge one of my core beliefs before breakfast every day. So hopefully I planted a couple seeds how to be less polarized, especially in this wild political climate. I hope that was helpful to somebody. Take care.